Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved the U.S. brokered plan for a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages after convening with his cabinet.
The European Commission has launched an internal probe into reports that Hungarian intelligence services tried to recruit EU employees in Brussels as informants. Russian President Vladimir Putin has admitted that Russian air defenses were responsible for shooting down an Azerbaijani jet last December.
Israel's government has approved U.S. President Donald Trump's plan for a ceasefire in Gaza along with the release of the remaining hostages. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the news in the early hours of Friday after convening with his cabinet, as well as U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
We fought during these 2 years to achieve our war aims, and the central one of these war aims is to return the hostages, all of the hostages, the living and the dead. And we're about to achieve that goal. We couldn't have achieved it without the extraordinary help of President Trump and his team, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
Here we are today because Hamas had to, they had to do this deal. The pressure was on them, they were backed up, and you've got the bigger army, you were making inroads, and that's what led to this deal.
Hamas detailed that the first phase of Trump's plan would include an immediate cessation of hostilities, the release of Palestinian prisoners jailed in Israel, and more.
وإننا نعلن اليوم التوصل لاتفاق لإنهاء الحرب والعدوان على شعبنا والبدء بتنفيذ وقف دائم لإطلاق النار وانسحاب قوات الاحتلال ودخول المساعدات وفتح معبر رفح في الاتجاهين وتبادل الأسرى.
The Hamas announcement was met with widespread joy across Gaza, who after 2 years of intense bombardment are now seeing relief on the horizon. The group also shared that they've acquired the necessary guarantees from Washington and mediating countries to ensure that the war on the enclave has, quote, ended completely.
Europe has welcomed the agreement reached between Israel and Hamas to secure a ceasefire and to release hostages held in Gaza. Many leaders stressed that this deal must be a first step towards a two-state solution, something which Israel has repeatedly rejected. Although the EU has been lambasted as irrelevant by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a recent interview with Euronews, the European Commission says the EU has a role to play.
The EU is well positioned to contribute to President Trump's peace plan. The EU High Representative has also been quite clear about that we have an important role to play and that we should also be part of that. This is due to our consistent political and also financial support to both Israel and also the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people, as well as regional integration.
The President of the European Commission said the EU will keep supporting the delivery of humanitarian aid into Gaza, while ensuring the EU will be ready to help with recovery and reconstruction. The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, stated this opportunity must be used to lay the foundation for a lasting peace and called for a two-state solution. For his part, French President Emmanuel Macron also reiterated calls for the two-state solution. This first phase of a peace plan announced by US President Donald Trump provides for the release of the remaining 20 living Israeli hostages. It also includes the condition that Israel will release almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, allow the delivery of some aid into Gaza, and withdraw its troops from most of the Strip.
U.S. President Donald Trump suggested that Spain should be thrown out of NATO as he met with his Finnish counterpart Alexander Stubb in the Oval Office on Thursday. The meeting, supposed to be the prelude to Finland's purchasing of U.S. icebreaker ships, steered into a discussion on the defense alliance. Trump had been feuding with Spain for several months, ever since the Iberian nation announced that it would not comply with his demands of raising defense spending to 5% of GDP.
As you know, I requested that they pay 5%, not 2%, and most people thought that was not going to happen, and it happened virtually unanimously. We had one laggard. It was Spain. Spain, they're doing fine. They have no excuse not to do this, but that's all right. maybe you should throw him out of NATO, frankly.
The meeting with Stubb also formally secured the sale of the fleet of 11 ships, worth roughly 5.3 billion euros, the first to be delivered by 2028.
It is rejected. We move to
the European Parliament has rejected 2 back-to-back motions of censure against European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The first motion of no confidence, tabled by far-right groups, was rejected on Thursday with 378 votes against, 179 in favour and 37 abstentions. The initiators of the motions did not, however, see this as a defeat.
This is a process, it's not a definite thing. It's just to put pressure on von der Leyen and to show her weak points and that she has no conditions to continue. So we will continue to this on this strategy until she understands that she cannot keep on going.
MEPs also rejected the motion of censure tabled by far-left groups with 383 votes against, 133 in favour and 78 abstentions.
Consider it as a first victory. I think Ursula von der Leyen has never been as weakened as of now. And I think there's a number of MEPs that are supposedly into the coalition of Ursula von der Leyen that have actually been voting in favour of a motion of censure, and it says some things about the anger, I think, that Ursula von der Leyen is creating.
Though Ursula von der Leyen will be relieved to have overcome 3 separate no-confidence votes in the past few months, she owes the survival of her coalition to the broader international geopolitical context.
We voted in general against, and I think the most important reason is that if we are now looking at the situation in the world, now sending away the European Commission is really not a smart thing to do.
The groups that form the so-called centrist majority, and most of the MEPs from the Greens and from the European Conservatives and Reformists, defended the Commission against accusation over trade policy and lack of transparency. But this does not mean that challenges are over for Ursula von der Leyen and for the Commission. The next big battle in the Parliament could concern the multi-annual budget of the European Union, where she could end up at odds, even with the members of her own group, the European People's Party. Vincenzo Genovese, Euronews, Strasbourg.
The European Commission has launched an internal probe into reports that Hungarian intelligence services tried to recruit EU employees in Brussels as informants. According to an investigation, undercover agents posing as diplomats at Hungary's permanent representation allegedly targeted Hungarian staff inside EU institutions to gain access to sensitive files.
Actions. Now, this is a matter of operational security, which is why, as usual, I won't be able to comment much, but what I can say is that we will be setting up an internal group to look into these allegations.
The Commission says it takes the claims seriously and is taking measures to protect staff and information from illicit intelligence-gathering activities. The report said the network operated under the diplomatic cover of Hungary's EU mission between 2012 and 2018. The mission was at the time led by Oliver Varnelyi, who is now the European Commissioner for Health. When asked by Euronews, the Commission said no such allegations existed in 2019 when Varhelyi was vetted for his post. The European Parliament has not commented on the case, but says it continues to monitor security risks. Russian President Vladimir Putin has admitted that Russian air defences were responsible for shooting down an Azerbaijani passenger jet last December. The admission marks his first public acknowledgement of blame for the tragedy.
Находился украинский беспилотник. Мы вели сразу 3 таких беспилотника, которые пересекли границу Российской Федерации ночью, в день трагедии. Вторая причина заключается в технических сбоях самой системы ПВО России. И 2 ракеты, которые были выпущены, они не поразили напрямую самолет. Если бы это произошло, он рухнул бы на месте, а взорвались Может быть, это была самая ликвидация в нескольких метрах, где-то примерно в 10 метрах. Мы, безусловно, как и договаривались.
The passenger jet was travelling from Baku to Grozny when it crashed near Aktau, Kazakhstan, killing 38 people. Another 29 survived, thanks to the quick actions of the pilots. Investigators found the plane was struck by shrapnel during drone activity above Grozny. The pilots reportedly requested an emergency landing in Russia, but were told to fly on across the Caspian Sea towards Kazakhstan. Azerbaijan had earlier accused Moscow of trying to cover up the incident and said it would pursue legal action.
At least 2 people have been killed in a 7.4 magnitude earthquake which struck off the southeastern coast of the Philippines. Footage from the city of Davao, the biggest city near the epicenter, shows health workers rushing wounded earthquake victims to hospital. One woman died in the city of Mati after being hit by falling debris, according to local officials. Filipino quake experts said they were expecting damage and aftershocks from the quake. Locals had initially received evacuation warnings for tsunami threats, but the warning was later lifted. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Honolulu said waves of up to 3 meters above normal tides were also possible on some Philippine coasts, and smaller waves were possible in Indonesia and Palau.